Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk, producer and host of the Public Relations Review podcast. When I conceived this program, my idea was to provide public relations practitioners with a wide variety of solid, useful information and guidance from public relations professionals across America. And we are doing that. I will continue to cover important topics such as crisis communications and artificial intelligence and other such important topics. But I will also address other issues such as diversity in public relations, marketing to women, public relations trends, various data concerns, and much more. From time to time, I will also invite vendors of public relations products on to help you better understand how these products can improve your efficiency and your effectiveness. You will learn a lot from our podcast, so thank you for listening, and please inform your colleagues about the Public Relations Review podcast and continue listening. Thank you so very much.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to Public Relations Review. Healthcare continues to be an important segment in our economy. Locally, many healthcare providers and organizations use public relations to provide health-related information to their communities. And each organization produces programs and events that are most effective for its organization and its target audience. Joining us today from Charlotte, North Carolina is Logan Stewart. She is both the president-elect of the Carolina Healthcare Public Relations and Marketing Society and the Public Relations Director for OrthoCarolina. She is also a communications professional with more than 17 years of experience, including extensive work in healthcare. She also wants you to know she has a heartfelt passion for storytelling. OrthoCarolina is one of the leading independent academic orthopedic practices in the nation. Their 300 providers see more than 1 million patients across North and South Carolina each year. Logan, welcome to Public Relations Review.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. I'm really excited to be on the podcast this morning.
Well, thank you for being with us. Now, you've got 300 providers seeing 1 million patients in North and South Carolina. How many offices do you actually have?
Yeah, so we actually have, total physicians, we have right around about 160 actual physicians. Providers, obviously, much more than that. We have 40 offices in both North and South Carolina, but we're based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. So our offices are heavily concentrated in the greater Charlotte region.
Now, with 40 offices and obviously putting on various PR programs for all of those, how large a staff do you have?
Well, so staff-wise, total employees, we're just a hair under 2,000 employees. Marketing-wise, on our marketing team, we are only 6. So I like to say we're small, but we're mighty, and that, includes all marketing, all digital marketing, all physician relations, all PR, all communications is done by our small staff of 6.
Well, I tell you, under those circumstances, tell us about how you go about deciding what programs to have in your various offices. How does that work? Do your staff of 6 decide from talking to people, let's say, in somewhere in South Carolina that they'd like to have this? Or how does that work? Tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about how we're structured, I think, which will lay the framework for it. So, as I said, most of our offices are based in the greater Charlotte area. Now, some of our offices, we didn't per se acquire them, but they were smaller orthopedic groups that decided to join with our practice under the OrthoCarolina name. So sometimes those offices, so for example, we have one in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is about an hour and a half down the road. They come with their own separate marketing budget. So I say that because typically all of our offices are marketed as OrthoCarolina. So we don't market, for example, the spine center by itself, or we don't, market a location called OrthoCarolina Monroe by itself. We do everything under the umbrella of OrthoCarolina that we do. So, but with some of these other locations, that joined on that were previously separate entities, they come with their own marketing budget. So we do, for some of those, have a separate marketing plan. And typically those offices are in different geographic locations, so they're not in the Charlotte market. So as I mentioned, one's in Winston-Salem. Another one is in Boone, North Carolina, which is kind of up in the mountains 2 hours away. They kind of have their own marketing budget, marketing plan. And so we have people on our marketing team that are designated to help really research, the media opportunities there. I'm the PR director, so I'll do the PR director for every office no matter what. But, so some of them might have a slightly different marketing plan, but we all are marketed under the umbrella of OrthoCarolina.
Now, I would imagine, tell us about the types of PR activities or projects that you put on, let's say for a major city, or as you said, maybe in a place such as Boone. What are the different types of projects that you develop?
So I'll first say that, with some groups, especially larger, hospital groups, there's multiple public relations and marketing people. And because our group is so small and so nimble, we do more of a marketing communications blend. And that's just, because of the bandwidth that we have. And also some of our skill sets just kind of cross. So I may be public relations director, but a lot of our content marketing strategy is on my team. So we kind of do a blend of marketing communications. So I would say really the way that we approach things, and this goes for our outer markets as well as in Charlotte, is we don't do, huge ad buys. Like you won't drive down the highway and see us plastered all over a billboard. We invest a lot of our money into community partnerships, and we find that for us that provides the most in return for us, plus we're giving back to the community. So that may be something as large as the Carolina Panthers. So that's probably, the NFL team. So that's probably our biggest marketing investment that we have. Obviously, that's not cheap to say that you're the team position to the Carolina Panthers, which we are. So that's a heavy investment for us. But we do that on large scale, such as with the Panthers. We do that on a medium scale, other community groups, all the way down to youth baseball, youth soccer. So, you may see any child that plays for Charlotte Soccer Academy, it says OrthoCarolina across the front of their jerseys. Now, for us, it's a pretty minimal investment overall, but what happens is that not only are they wearing those jerseys on the field, but they go to the grocery store after the games in those jerseys. They go to, a birthday party wearing their jerseys. So in essence, it's like little walking billboards for us. And that's just one example. But, we find that for us, the best investment of our marketing dollars is not in huge advertising buys, but it's really just to put that money back into the community. So to support youth sports, to support local sports teams, to support things that aren't even sports. We actually are a big supporter of TED Talks every year, which comes to Charlotte. So the Charlotte TED Talks, we do that. Davidson is a small community, which is just up the road from Charlotte, about 30 minutes, and they have a classical music station up there that does a young chamber musicians competition every year, encouraging people to check out chamber music, which is just something you don't really think about, but we just really like to plug into every place that we can find in these communities and just to kind of boost what they're doing there.
Let me ask you now, do you also, let's say, have education programs? Because orthopedics, I think of orthopedics as about joints and that sort of thing. I'm not quite sure about that, but do you put on programs as to how to show people how to protect themselves from injury, that sort of thing?
We do, yes. And so, I wouldn't say, so when you say put on programs, we do events every now and then. So that just kind of, it depends on the year. It depends what's going on. So some of those events will be specific to an office or, to be honest, to a body part. So I say that because last year we did a big spine seminar. I think it was last spring, but it was held in Charlotte. It was done by our OrthoCarolina Spine Center physicians. We hosted it at a brewery because Charlotte is huge with breweries, and we needed a big space that would be accommodating, but we could also have catered. It was free and open to the public, but you had to RSVP. So we actually had, I think, almost 700 people.
Oh, my heavens.
So, well, I will say that anytime that happens, they don't all show up. So we probably had in the range of 450 to 500 that actually showed up. But for us, it was a huge win because, all these people came out. Obviously, free food doesn't hurt. But came out to hear this information on, spine education, spine surgery options, non-surgical options. They got to meet the doctors, and it was all for free. So for us, that was, it was well worth the money because it was a big investment, not just in educational programming, but also in the community because we're providing, a free service to the community. Now, I will say that we want to do more of these. They're obviously, they cost a little bit, so we can't do a ton of them. We pick and choose where we do those, but we're currently planning one in another market that's close to Charlotte. We do also do in our Winston-Salem office, which again is about an hour and a half away, we partner with the local newspaper there, the Winston-Salem Journal, to do a series of community forums basically on different topics. So the last one was held actually last week, and they call these Twin City Talks. And Winston-Salem, just as background, is called the Twin City. Winston and Salem were the original cities. So the program is called Twin City Talks, and again, it's free and open to the public. And I think the topic last time was opioid abuse. So they had a sellout crowd, and it's obviously a topic that it hits home for a lot of people, and it was a heavy topic, but I think it was a great opportunity to bring people together and just to have an open conversation. So we did that in conjunction with the local newspaper, and of course, for us it's great because the paper covers it. They also have a blog that covers it, and we can share those links on our social media. So that's again for us really powerful, effective marketing, and it shows that we acknowledge that many times physicians, when it comes to opioids, have been part of the problem in the past, but we are taking strides to prevent some of that, and that's part of the reason that we do that.
Well, I was happy to hear, the fact that when I like the idea of those community outreach efforts that can provide people useful information that they can use in their daily lives. Certainly opioids is one, but then as I listen to you talk about, let's say the youth soccer league, kids running around, so forth and so on, makes me wonder about information as to how kids can protect themselves. Do they need knee braces, or how to, that sort of information that parents can use, because kids love soccer. They're going to play it, but can we do it in a safe way so that we really won't get bruised or scarred or whatever happens while we're playing soccer?
Definitely, yeah. And so the way that we approach most of that, because we can't put on tons and tons of events every year, my team does a lot with what we call content marketing. So that is, basically anything you'd find on the internet. So some of that is written form. So it may be blogs, it may be videos. We create videos however we can. It may be social media. It may be podcasts like we're talking about now. So anything that is created by our team or with a third-party team that's about a lot of those topics you talk about. So it goes on our blog. We actually have a section called Our Blog. And in there you'll find, all kinds of topics. So we have specifically orthopedic topics. You can search if there's a particular topic you're interested in. We have lifestyle topics, so things about running, about soccer, about football. Right now we're actually doing what we call a content package. So we do a ton of different pieces of content. So some of that, again, is blog, some is video, but it's all on ergonomics, which is like how you sit in your chair. So you're supposed to sit at like a 90 degree angle, not slumping. Within that, we talk about standing desks, and we talk about using yoga balls as chairs, and we do all of these different ergonomic topics that go into that one content package. So there's a wealth of information online on the blog, and within that there's a lot of these youth sports topics. And of course we do we have an OrthoCarolina pediatric center as well, so we try to get those doctors and physician assistants involved when we write these. So sometimes they'll write them for us, sometimes we ghostwrite them for the doctors, sometimes we interview them. We also work with some local websites who are a little bit more family focused, so they focus on things to do in the community, or they may focus on, just anything that's related to family or other specific topics. So we may work with the publishers of those local websites to develop pieces of content around a youth soccer topic or whatever their audience is interested in. And generally those are paid, which is part of our marketing plan, and it's fine. And a lot of that's what people call paid content.
It's interesting when you said you were developing certain outreach efforts. I remember some years ago when I was still living in Washington, D.C., that I was doing some PR work for a hospital and wound up getting an assignment to do their very first television commercial, and it happened to be about diabetes. Well, obviously, I don't know anything about it, so I tracked down the doc who handles that sort of stuff and tell me what is it that people need to know in 30 seconds. So, and that's the way, you work to develop I've worked to develop the content for that, and I learned a lot. I did not know that diabetes, for instance, has that you can lose limbs if your diabetes gets out of hand.
Oh,
getting
yeah.
that kind of information to people, I think, was very, very helpful. But at least I understood what the process was, that when I'm involved in something I really know nothing about, I need to bring in an expert to fill me in and help guide me toward what is the most important information that I can deliver in 30 seconds.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, I've been with OrthoCarolina almost 6 years, and I have a PR background, but the industry I came from before that was entertainment. I was not in healthcare. So when I started, it's not that I have to come in and learn every single orthopedic topic and learn, what is an arthroplasty inside and out, but I do have to know how to connect with the experts that can tell me what that is. And as a PR professional, sometimes when you talk to a doctor, the way they speak is very elevated and it's very scientific. And so I have to know how to take that language and translate it into what people can understand, and like general people speak, because doctors don't always talk that way.
That's interesting because my background experiences are somewhat similar. Again, when I was in Washington, D.C., I was the press secretary on Capitol Hill. So with all that legislation going on up there, there's a lot of detail that goes into that. And what I discovered early on is that I don't need to know each and every piece of it. I need to know the major parts that's being sold to the public. Then when the details and nuts and bolts come in, I call on what we call a legislative person who wrote the legislation, who can then fill in all those questions that reporters and others might have about it. So I certainly understand that process, bringing the people who know what it is rather than trying to guess on how to answer these questions.
Yeah, and I think the general public would be surprised how long it takes to get information like that, sit down with it, digest it, play with the wording, edit it. For us, it's a long process because we're trying to, again, make it digestible, understandable, put it in a format that's easy to read. Some of these doctors, we engage them when we want to create content or blogs on the web. And sometimes that means they will send us, a 2 paragraphs that are, it's like run-on sentences because they're in such a rush and they just don't have the time to sit down. And we're just trying to make sense of it. I mean, it takes research on our part sometimes. So it does take a while to create really good content that's original and that it's interesting for people to read, because I think that's the other thing, when you're a content marketer, you have to think about is it's not just creating and churning out content. To say you're a content producer, you have to think about what is your audience interested in. So sure, it's orthopedic topics, for sure, because that's probably why they're going to come to our website and search too. But, we want to drive as many people as we can to our website. So how do we do that? So we have to think about ways that we can find the touch points of what they do every day. And so for us, that's lifestyle topics. So people try to be active. So we write about running. We write about, for a long time we were writing about CrossFit. I think we've kind of laid off that, for a while. But we may write about weight training or yoga or just, it doesn't even have to be an active topic, but just anything that somehow ties back to orthopedics, or maybe we talk about nutrition, which is not directly related to orthopedics, but it can be because nutrition can affect your bones. So maybe we'll talk to, a partner, which may be, Atrium Health is one of our partners, local hospital system. So we may bring in an expert to talk about nutrition on our blog. So just things that can really impact people every day, because that way when they see these links on a third-party website, or maybe they see it on social media and they're like, oh, wow, I'm really interested. Let me go read this. So that, of course, drives them to our site, which is great for us. And maybe they're reading something about, let's say, what to do if you sprain your ankle while running. So maybe they don't need that topic today, but the day may come when they sprain their ankle while they're running. And who are they going to remember had that great story? And of course, we don't want people to sprain their ankles, right? But we just want to be in the back of their mind so that when that happens, or when their mother falls and needs something for her hip, or, whatever it may be, that they think of OrthoCarolina first.
Well, I think what you just mentioned really, really important to me is partnerships with people. When you said something about running, the first thing that came to my mind was a running club, having some sort of an event, how to prepare for whatever it is, a 5K run, to do it the right way, those kinds of things. I had somebody, as you said, a nutritionist that can talk about things to eat and things not to eat while you're in the practice of preparing for a run or any other sort of activity.
Yeah, definitely. And, we do that a lot on our blog and content. Running is a huge topic, and we do a lot around that every year. We actually put on our own 5K, 10K race every August, which is called the OrthoCarolina 10K Classic. So around late summer, we do a huge running push just across the board. So that's not only, on our own pages on our website, but we engage some of our partners to do stuff on their web pages. They may do interviews with our providers. They may repurpose content that we've already created and run it on their site.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, social media will do a ton. From a public relations perspective, depending on, so we'll stick with the running theme. If it's running, running is what we're working around. So maybe I reach out to, whatever TV station. We actually have 6 of them here in Charlotte. So maybe I reach out to the health reporter and I say, hey, it's summer. I may or may not mention the race. If they see that we have a race, great. But would you like to share with your viewers how to stay cool when you're running in the 100-degree heat? We have an expert who is a physician assistant, but also runs, who we can set up an interview, for with you or whatever. So, I try to line up some of the PR around the content topics that we're already talking about, because it just logically falls into place, and then it creates more shareable links that we have too.
I noticed that sort of thing happening around here. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt does a lot of outreach when something is coming up, as you said, particularly the heat. And these big festivals, when all these folks that are together in 90-degree weather and so forth and so on, they give tips as to how to, I guess, ample hydration, so forth, and maybe some shade, so forth and so on, so that folks don't pass out. So that kind of thing, activity, I think, is really, really a smart move.
Yeah, and it can honestly transfer over. Obviously it doesn't have to be just about running, but, I mentioned a little bit earlier, in first quarter of this year, we're working on ergonomics content, right? So again, how you sit, how your posture is, how you sit at your desk, all that kind of thing. So with that, I've been reaching out to a lot of the local TV stations here, and pitching them stories around ergonomics. Now, if they happen to go on our website, so we have all this, content on ergonomics, I don't know that affects whether they'll do the story one way or the other, but what I'm offering to the reporters is a nicely packaged story where I say, hey, I've got a physical therapist who can talk to you about standing desks, the risks and the benefits of them. You can come out, let me know what's convenient for you, and then we'll interview. We have a standing desk. So it's a story already ready for them, and usually they're like, oh yeah, we'd love to do that, because most of these health reporters especially need, topics, and when you give it to them already prepackaged, they're like, it's like a slam dunk. So, I just try to strategically plan it with what we're doing.
You and I are on the same page on a lot of different things. Again, when I was in Washington, D.C., I was working for a consulting firm, and one of the clients was the National Institutes of Health and the Surgeon General. So he had mentioned to me he wanted to do a press conference in Washington. Now, Washington, D.C. has boatloads of press conferences every day. So he wanted to say something specifically about AIDS. It was not a huge deal, but he wanted to direct it to a minority group. So I let him know. I said, look, fine, we can go to the National Press Building and call a press conference. No guarantee who's going to be there, simply because there's so much going on up there all the time, and so many different people having press conferences. What I suggested to him, because having traveled when I was in the Clinton administration, that a lot of reporters outside of D.C. don't get a chance to talk to major government officials. I proposed to him that you tell me the cities that you really want to reach. I will reach out to the print reporters in those cities and ask them specifically, would you be interested in talking directly to the U.S. Surgeon General? Every one of them said yes. So that's exactly what I knew was going to happen. We prepackaged information to at least 10 or 12 reporters, sent it down, set up the conference call. He said what he had to say in whatever it was, 5-10 minutes. The rest of them called, asked their questions, and everybody was really, really happy. So we got really major hits that way, as compared to maybe somebody sending a small reporter over to maybe cover it. So the way you put things together like that, I was really, really pleased to hear that, and I hope other people will take this to heart and do the same thing. That's valuable stuff.
Yeah, and I mean that's awesome what you did, and it's this is something I've learned. I mean, I've had to learn over the years, because I've done PR really since I got out of school, but I had to learn these things over the years, because I used to just I call a reporter and say, hey, we're my nonprofit or whatever I work for is having an event. You want to come cover it? And I wouldn't get a call back. And so I've learned over time, they want a story, right? Like, their audience either wants a story or they want valuable information. It's not about me. It's not about my organization. It is about their audience. So you have to give them a nice story that their audience can use, and if you think of it that way, you can honestly be pretty successful with your pitching, as long as the second challenge is breaking through the clutter, especially when you're talking to like national media. But with local and regional, it's a little bit easier if you make it easier on yourself to begin with.
Well, again, you said prepackaged, because again, working on Capitol Hill, you've got 500 members of Congress, a little bit over 500 members of Congress. Each one has a press secretary. They all want coverage. Now, as you said,
Exactly.
It's easier to get local stuff, but the national stuff, you really got to have your game together, because, I would call the New York Times, the folks in New York, they don't want to fool around. If you don't have a substantive story with all the information and people available, you're going to get a hard time. So, as you said, prepackaged. Here's the story. Here's the idea. I can make the congressman available to you. When would you like to do this? Make it as easy for them as possible. Give them everything they need, the data that supports what it is you're talking about, so forth and so on. It really, really works. To hear that you've done that warms the cockles of my heart.
Oh, yeah. No, I would say you were 100% on. To be honest, and I do, because a lot of our doctors do really high-level research, right? So they're doing surgeries that nobody's ever done before. They're creating orthopedic inventions and devices that I can't even tell you what they are, but, just these super high level things. So, for example, we had some doctors, I guess about a year and a half ago, that were doing some brand new amputee surgeries that had never been done before. Just happened to have a patient that, very sadly, she'd actually been swimming in the Bahamas and had her arm severed by a shark. So, but that came along at a time when we were, I was trying to pitch the amputee surgeries that they were doing, because they were pioneering these surgeries, and the patient was wonderful, let us work with her, and of course we wanted to get that on national TV. And even with that, I was emailing endlessly, and I've got access to some of the big media contact platforms, so Decision, and I've had Meltwater, and I've used a couple of them, and I'm emailing about this, and I'm not getting response, and or I get a response and they'd say no, or that, and I was so frustrated, and I actually got on Twitter, was pitching a reporter with the Today Show, got some interest through Twitter, and even after that, it took 9 months to finally get the story done, because he always had, something else going on, or he'd be traveling another story, and he'd put me off. And, he'd tell me to call him, and he'd forget. And then when I talked to him, he was very rushed with me. And to the, I had to, just not take it personally, because sometimes you do. And I'm like, God, he was interested in the story, I can't get him to do it. But, what I learned from that was you've got to follow through. And, if you get these little bites, just keep chasing them and chasing them and chasing them, because you can be successful, but you, again, have a great story. Don't give up, and think about alternative ways to reach some of these media, because for me, it wasn't email. It ended up being social media.
Well, the other thing that I learned also is that if you can show your story, and it is a one-of-a-kind or first-of-a-kind, that's something that they really pay attention to. I got another story here in Nashville. One of the hospitals was starting this research center, and when the folks told me that, as a matter of fact, they didn't even realize it was the first of its kind in the nation. But when I heard that, my antenna went up. And that's when I decided, let me get as much information as I can. And rather than, of course, I pitched the local folks here, but then I got on the phone and called people at National Public Radio, so forth and so on. So I got them 3 national radio interviews, because it wound up being the first of its kind in the country. And as a matter of fact, my second editorial was also built around that the newspaper gave them as well.
That's fantastic. And you're right. So anything that sets it apart, whether it's first in the country, whether it's, just anything like that. And I think the other thing to think about too is if you want to offer, if there's a specific media outlet you're super interested in, you're like, I really want my story in New York Times or whatever it may be, offer them the exclusive first.
Mm-hmm.
They may not respond or turn it down, but that's, if there's one you want to be in, try doing that. So.
Well, Logan, this has been a very, very excellent topic, and we've put in a lot of time on this. And let me ask you in closing: is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience about the successes you've had, either in your career or with OrthoCarolina?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just love to say, if healthcare public relations and or marketing communications is something they're interested in, I think it's a great field. People ask me a lot of times, is orthopedics boring? And I'm like, it's only boring if you let it be boring. I mean, you got to think strategically and think about your audience. And to me, that's what's challenging, is thinking about what our audience wants. And then also working with doctors, because they can be difficult to work with and they can be amazing to work with. So you have to be able to communicate with a lot of different people, and to do that well, you have to be a great communicator. And the other thing I would say to think about if you're in healthcare, which is a whole other topic, there's patient privacy laws, which we also call HIPAA. So that for us is always a really big thing, and we can never talk about a patient without their permission. And for us, that comes in the form of actual signed permission that we keep on file, because we just don't want anyone to ever come back and say that we weren't authorized to talk about them. So patient privacy is a huge topic in healthcare, but I would say it's a really fun space to work in. There's always new topics, and there's research, and there's people doing new things every day. So it's a great place to work.
Well, again, Logan, thank you so very much for joining the Public Relations Review. I have enjoyed talking to you. I'm certain that our audience will also enjoy it as well. And hopefully we'll have a chance to do this again soon.
Thank you, Peter. I enjoyed it as well.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.